Seeds of distance. Elena Moretti stood by the nursery window, her fingertips tracing the outline of a cloud on the pale yellow wall. 6 months pregnant, she felt both incredibly full and inexplicably empty. The room was perfect. A crib assembled with loving care, stuffed animals arranged in a watchful semicircle, a mobile of stars and moons hanging delicately from the ceiling. Everything was ready, except perhaps the marriage that had created this new life. "Marco?" she called out, knowing already there would be no answer. Her husband's car had left the driveway before sunrise, as it did most days now. Elena sighed, resting her hand on her swollen belly. "Just you and me again today, little one." At 31, Elena had imagined a different life than the one unfolding before her. A talented pastry chef who had put her career on hold for the pregnancy, she now spent her days in a beautiful home that felt increasingly hollow. Marco, 34 and ambitious, had been promoted to regional director at his architectural firm 6 months ago, the same week they had discovered they were expecting. What should have been a period of shared joy had instead become a slow unraveling. The chime of her phone interrupted her thoughts. A text from Daniela, her closest friend. "Coffee at Rosetta's? You need human contact beyond talking to your belly button." Elena smiled and grabbed her purse. Daniela was right. She couldn't keep waiting for Marco to be present. Rosetta's cafe sat on the corner of their small Connecticut town's main street, a place where the aroma of fresh pastries competed with the scent of brewing espresso. Elena slid into her usual booth, waving at Rosetta herself, a 60-something Italian woman who treated regular customers like wayward children who needed feeding. "You look tired." "Bella," Daniela said as she joined Elena, setting down 2 decaf lattes. At 32, Daniela possessed the frank honesty that came from 15 years of friendship. "Marco didn't come home until after midnight again," Elena admitted. "The Westbrook project is apparently in crisis mode." Daniela's expression darkened. "Every project is in crisis mode lately. Has been for months." Elena stared into her cup. "He's working with Sophia Reeves on this one." The name felt strange on her tongue, like a foreign object she couldn't quite swallow. Sophia, 29, brilliant and driven, had joined the firm a year ago. Elena had met her exactly twice at company functions, but lately, her name appeared in Marco's conversations with increasing frequency. "You know, Thomas from accounting saw them having dinner last week," Daniela said carefully. "At Luciano's?" Elena felt her heart constrict. Luciano's was where Marco had proposed to her 4 years ago. "It was probably work-related," Elena said, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. That evening, Marco returned home earlier than usual, his dark hair disheveled, his tie loosened. For a moment, Elena saw the man she had fallen in love with, passionate, creative, intense. He kissed her cheek and placed a hand on her belly. "How are my girls today?" he asked, his Italian accent still detectable after 15 years in America. "We missed you," Elena said simply. "Both of us." Marco's smile faltered slightly. "The Westbrook project is nearly complete. Things should calm down soon." Elena nodded, wanting desperately to believe him. "I made your favorite, risotto with wild mushrooms." They ate dinner together, and for fleeting moments, it felt like before. Marco talked about the building's innovative design, and Elena shared stories about the nursery preparations. But when his phone buzzed during dessert, Elena watched his expression change as he read the message. "I'm sorry," he said, already standing. "There's an issue with the structural supports. I need to go back to the office." "At 9 o'clock at night?" Elena asked, her voice small. Marco kissed the top of her head. "I won't be long. Don't wait up." As the front door closed, Elena sat alone at the table they had chosen together, surrounded by the home they had built, carrying the child they had created. Yet somehow she had never felt more solitary. The secret she kept, that she had seen Sophia's name flash on his phone screen, sat heavy in her chest like a stone. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, distant and cold. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, a practice embrace for the child growing within her, wondering if Marco's arms now belonged to someone else.
The empty space. The contraction started at 3 in the morning, each wave crashing through Elena's body with increasing intensity. She fumbled for her phone in the darkness, Marco's side of the bed still empty and cold. "Marco?" She gasped into the phone when he finally answered. "It's time. The baby's coming." "Now? But you're not due for another week," he said, his voice thick with sleep and something else, hesitation. "Babies don't check calendars," Elena managed through gritted teeth. "Please come home." "I'll be right there," he promised. Elena called Daniela next, who arrived within 20 minutes, her eyes alert despite the hour. "Still no Marco?" she asked, helping Elena into the car. "He's on his way," Elena said, hoping it wasn't a lie. The maternity ward at Pinewood Memorial was a flurry of activity despite the early hour. Elena was wheeled into a delivery room, monitors beeping, nurses moving efficiently around her. Dr. Jasmine Patterson, her obstetrician with warm brown eyes and steady hands, checked her progress. 6 centimeters dilated already, Dr. Patterson announced. "This little one is eager to meet you." The hours blurred together in a haze of pain and anticipation. Daniela held Elena's hand, coached her breathing, wiped her brow. But with each passing contraction, the absence beside her grew more pronounced. "Call him again," Elena pleaded between breaths. Daniela stepped outside, returning with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Voicemail. "But he'll be here." When the time came to push, Marco's chair remained empty. Elena brought her daughter into the world at 11:47 a.m., the sound of her first cry filling the space where her father's voice should have been. "She's perfect," Dr. Patterson said, placing the tiny bundle on Elena's chest. "What's her name?" Elena looked down at the scrunched face, the dark wisps of hair so like Marco's. "Lucia," she whispered. "Her name is Lucia." It was nearly 3 hours later when Marco burst into the hospital room, his clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "There was an emergency at the site, and then my phone died and—" 14 hours, Elena said quietly, Lucia sleeping peacefully in her arms. "She's been in this world for 3 hours already." Marco approached cautiously, as if afraid he might be turned away. When he finally looked at his daughter, tears welled in his eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch Lucia's cheek. The moment should have been perfect, their family complete at last. But when Marco's phone chimed with a text message, Elena caught the flash of Sophia's name before he hurriedly silenced it. "You were with her," Elena said, the words falling between them like stones. Marco's silence was answer enough. The next few days passed in a fog of newborn care and unspoken accusations. Marco took paternity leave, moving mechanically through diaper changes and midnight feedings. But Elena could feel him drifting, his mind elsewhere even when his body was present. It was Daniela who finally forced the issue, arriving one afternoon with a determined set to her jaw. "I'm taking Lucia for a walk. You two need to talk." Once alone, the silence stretched between them like a chasm. "What's happening to us, Marco?" Elena finally asked. Marco sank onto the sofa, his face in his hands. "I don't know how to explain it," he said, his voice hollow. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did happen," Elena said. "You weren't there when your daughter was born because you were with Sophia." "It's not what you think," he began, then stopped himself. "No, that's not true. It might be exactly what you think." "Are you in love with her?" The question Elena had been afraid to ask for months. Marco looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I don't know. Maybe. We haven't. It's not physical, but emotionally." That's worse, Elena said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. You gave your heart to her while I was carrying your child. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. From down the hall came the soft sounds of Lucia stirring in her crib, a reminder of what was truly at stake. What happens now? Elena asked. Marco looked lost, a man drowning in the consequences of his own actions. I don't know. Shattered reflections. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting prison bar shadows across the kitchen table where Marco sat with his suitcase by the door. 3 weeks had passed since Lucia's birth, 3 weeks of strained politeness and separate bedrooms. I think some time apart might help, he said, not meeting Elena's eyes. Just until I figure things out. Elena cradled Lucia against her shoulder, the weight of her daughter the only thing keeping her anchored. Where will you go? The company has apartments for visiting clients, Marco said. I'll stay in one of those. Not with Sophia, then. At least not yet. Elena wondered if that was supposed to be a comfort. After Marco left, Elena moved through the house like a ghost, feeding Lucia, changing diapers, singing lullabies with a voice that sounded foreign to her own ears. Her mother, Camilla, arrived from Florida, bringing with her the scent of sunshine and the strength Elena desperately needed. Men are fools, Camilla declared, her Italian accent thicker than ever as she rocked Lucia. But this little angel doesn't need a fool for a father. She has us. Weeks stretched into months. Marco visited regularly, his interactions with Lucia growing more natural, even as those with Elena remained strained. They developed a rhythm of sorts, passing their daughter between them like a precious baton, careful never to touch. It was at Lucia's 3-month pediatric checkup that Elena saw them together for the first time. Marco and Sophia, entering the coffee shop across from the doctor's office, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Elena froze on the sidewalk, Lucia's carrier suddenly heavy in her grip. Sophia was everything Elena was not, tall where she was petite, her blonde hair a stark contrast to Elena's dark waves. But it was the easy intimacy between them that cut deepest. The way they moved in tandem, like dancers who had practiced for years. That night, after putting Lucia to bed, Elena called Marco. I saw you today, with her. The silence on the line stretched until Elena thought he might have hung up. I was going to tell you, he finally said. We're seeing each other, officially. Are you in love with her? Elena asked, for the second time. This time Marco didn't hesitate. Yes. The word hung between them, final as a death knell. I want a divorce, Elena said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. The proceedings were as civilized as the dissolution of a decade-long relationship could be. Marco moved most of his belongings out within a week. They agreed on joint custody, with Lucia living primarily with Elena. The house would be sold, the proceeds split equally. On the day Marco came to collect the last of his things, Elena found him in Lucia's nursery watching their daughter sleep. I never wanted to hurt you, he said softly. But you did, and now we all have to live with it. As Marco lifted the final box, Elena stopped him at the door. Was it worth it? She asked, needing to know even as she dreaded the answer. Marco looked at her then, truly looked at her for the first time in months. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I do know that Lucia deserves better than what we've become. In that moment of honesty, Elena felt the first stirring of something beyond pain, a quiet determination to create a life worthy of the child they had brought into the world with or without the man she had once believed would always be by her side. Bridges burned. Autumn arrived in a blaze of color, Lucia growing and changing as steadily as the seasons. At 6 months old, she had Marco's dark curls and Elena's curious eyes, a perfect blend of them both. Elena had returned to work part-time at a local bakery, finding solace in the precise measurements and predictable chemical reactions of pastry making. Daniela had convinced her to join a single parents group, where Elena met Nora, a straight-talking emergency room nurse raising twin boys on her own, and James, a widower whose daughter was just 2 months older than Lucia. Their friendship formed quickly, forged in the crucible of 3 a.m. feedings and first-tooth teething fevers. "Any word from the wayward husband?" Nora asked one evening as their children played on a blanket in Elena's living room. Elena shook her head. "He takes Lucia every other weekend, but we barely speak." She didn't mention that Marco always came alone, that Sophia had yet to meet Lucia. Some small, petty part of Elena was grateful for that. "His loss," James said quietly, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Some of us would give anything for what he threw away." The comment hung in the air, charged with possibility, though neither of them was ready to explore it further. Meanwhile, across town, Marco was discovering that fairy tale romances rarely survived contact with reality. The passion that had seemed so all-consuming in stolen moments now had to withstand mortgage discussions, disagreements about toilet seats, and the persistent shadow of guilt. "You're distant lately," Sophia said one night as they lay in bed, her voice cutting through the darkness. "I'm just tired," Marco replied, the excuse wearing thin even to his own ears. "Is it Lucia or Elena?" "Both. Neither." Marco sighed. "I don't know who I am anymore." The admission hung between them, the first crack in the foundation they had built on shifting sand. Sophia turned away from him. "Figure it out, Marco, because I didn't sign up to be the villain in someone else's story forever." The strain began to show in other ways. Colleagues who had once been friendly now kept their distance, whispering behind closed doors. Marco's parents, still in Italy, refused to acknowledge Sophia's existence during their weekly video calls. Even his closest friends seemed to choose sides, most aligning with Elena, whose dignity in the face of betrayal had earned their respect. It was at Lucia's first birthday party, a small gathering in Elena's backyard, that the facade finally crumbled. Marco arrived alone, bearing an elaborate dollhouse that Elena recognized as his own design. "Where's Sophia?" Elena asked, genuine curiosity replacing the bitterness that had once colored her voice. Marco's jaw tightened. She didn't think it would be appropriate. Or is it that she finally realized what she signed up for? Elena pressed, years of friendship giving her insight into the shadows beneath his eyes. "We're taking some time apart," Marco admitted. "It's complicated." Elena laughed, the sound startling them both. "It always is." The party proceeded with awkward politeness, Marco and Elena circling each other like wary dancers. It was only when James arrived, his daughter Harper toddling beside him, that Elena felt the knot in her chest begin to loosen. "Sorry we're late," James said, presenting Lucia with the hand-knitted stuffed elephant. Someone insisted on choosing the perfect ribbon herself. Elena watched as Marco noticed the easy familiarity between her and James, the quick smile they shared over the children's antics. Something shifted in Marco's expression. Recognition, perhaps, that life had continued in his absence, that new connections had formed in the spaces he had left behind. Later, as the party wound down and Lucia dozed in her high chair, smears of chocolate cake still on her cheeks, Marco approached Elena in the kitchen. "You seem happy," he said, somewhere between accusation and wonder. Elena considered this as she rinsed plates, realizing with surprise that it was true. "Not always, but more often than I expected to be." Marco nodded, a complicated grief in his eyes. "I'm glad," he said, And for the first time since their world had shattered, Elena believed him.
Full circle. Winter descended on the small town, snow blanketing the streets and muffling the world in white silence. Lucia, now 14 months old, delighted in the strange cold substance, her laughter like bells as Elena helped her make tiny snowmen in the backyard. Inside, the house had transformed, no longer a monument to what was lost, but a canvas for what might yet be. Elena had repainted the walls in warm colors, replaced furniture that held too many memories, planted her own garden where Marco's architectural drawings had once littered every surface. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, a surprisingly painless process given the devastation that had preceded it. Marco had been more than fair in the settlement, as if material generosity could somehow balance the emotional debt between them. The call came on a Tuesday evening, just as Elena was putting Lucia to bed. "Can we talk?" Marco asked, his voice tight with an emotion Elena couldn't quite identify. "In person?" They met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown that neither of them had frequented during their marriage. Marco arrived first, securing a corner table away from curious eyes in a town that still thrived on gentle gossip. "How's Lucia?" he asked after they had ordered coffee. "Growing too fast," Elena replied, the conversation settling into the safe territory of their daughter's development. "She says a new word every day, it seems." Marco smiled, pride momentarily overshadowing the tension in his shoulders. "She's extraordinary." "Like her father," Elena said automatically, then bit her lip. Old habits died hard. "No," Marco said softly, "like her mother." The compliment hung between them, unexpected and sincere. "Sophia and I are finished," Marco said, setting down his cup with deliberate care, for good this time. Elena nodded, unsurprised. She'd heard rumors, Sophia accepting a position in Chicago, Marco declining to follow. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. No one deserved to lose their way twice. "Don't be," Marco said. "It was inevitable, I think. What we had, it wasn't built to last. Not like—" He stopped, looking away. "Not like what we had?" Elena finished for him, the question genuine rather than bitter. Marco met her gaze, his eyes clear for the first time in nearly 2 years. "Yes, what I destroyed." The raw honesty in his voice startled her. This was not the Marco who had left, defensive and confused, but something closer to the man she had married, capable of facing hard truths. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked. Marco took a deep breath. "Because I want to come home," he said simply. "Not to the house, I know that's not possible, but to you, to Lucia, to the family we were supposed to be." The words Elena had once dreamed of hearing now filled her with a complicated tangle of emotions, hope and fear, longing and caution. "It's not that simple," she said, thinking of James, whose quiet companionship had grown into something neither of them had named yet, but both recognized. "I know," Marco acknowledged. "I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm asking for a chance to show you who I am now, who I want to be."